Hello chaps, today I'm going to show you how to play some jazz for a change. Previous things that I posted have showed you how to do some jazz lead guitar stuff. Well, this is pretty much the whole package, from the bass line through to the chords through to the lead guitar parts played over the top. The basic chord sequence we're going to be working with is just 3 chords really: G, C and D. I think the chord sequence I use is G, C, G to D, and I think it's a few times through that, 3 or 4 times through that. Now then, let's first of all put the guitar down and have a little bit of a look at the bass line. So just excuse me while I swap instruments here. Excuse the squeaky, creaky chair that you can hear. This is the famous eBay no-name bass. Let's make sure you can hear that. Hopefully that's audible there. Should be able to hear that. Right, we're going to put together a walking jazz type bass line. Now the most important thing to know about this is that when you're doing that walking style bass line, you're playing one note on each beat. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, with a different note on each beat. And all you have to be aware of is that the first beat in each bar needs to be the root note of the chord. So if we're going for a bar of G, it's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the C, back to the G, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. And those are the main important notes really, and what you do is you just kind of fill in the gaps with anything that will take you towards the next note that you're going to. So let's have a look at how I'm going to get from the G to the C. I'm going to play this G note on beat 1 of the G bar, there it is, and then I'll play this B note here on 2, and that's, if you kind of think about how a G chord would look on the guitar, you can see that that B note is actually part of a G chord. So that's G, B, then I'll play the other note from a G chord, which is a D note, which is there. So that's 1, 2, 3. So what do I do on beat 4? Well, I'm aiming towards the C note for the beginning of the next bar. So my D note is there, so why not just fill in the gap with that note there? So I'm going to go from the G to the C using 1, 2, 3, 4, then onto the C note there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And already that's starting to sound a bit like a walking jazz bass line. The next chord is going back to the G again, so what I'm going to do here is just go from the C note on beat 1 of the C bar via this B note here to an A note, so that's that. Then how do I get back to the G chord again? Well, there's my G note there, there's the note that I've finished, that I've kind of got up to on the C run. So all I'll do is just fill in the blank with that little chromatic note there. So my C back to G run goes, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, back to the G. So the 2 bars together are going to go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And it's getting jazzier by the second. Next thing I'm going to do is go from this G to climb up towards my D chord, which there's the D note there. So I'll start the G in exactly the same way as I did before. There's a G note, there's a B note, and then I'll just go, so that's me 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'll just again use chromatic notes to fill in the blanks. Chromatic notes are just going, by the way, 1 fret at a time. So the G to the D is going to go, and there I am on my D note. How do I get from the D back to the G again? Well, in a D chord we have 3 notes: D, F sharp and A. And that F sharp note, there it is, there is also available an octave lower there. So I'm going to go from that D to my F sharp. I'll play the A note here, which is also in the D chord. Then that allows me to just walk chromatically back to the G chord again. So here are those chord changes again, the G to the C. Oops, the G to the C rather. The C back to the G. The G going up to the D. And the D coming back to the G. And that makes a complete bass line of and what follows next is me playing that with a slightly better sound recorded in Cakewalk. Here's the demonstration of that bass line, then it goes I think 3 or 4 times through. Right, so that's the walking bass line taken care of. Now let's look at how we want to put some chords over that. I could just play the G, C and D chords, but that wouldn't sound very jazzy. What we're going to do now are some chord substitutions, which sounds like it's going to be quite complicated, but if you stick with it, I promise you it isn't. The key thing, really, excuse the pun, is to know what key you are in. It's fairly obvious here that we're in the key of G. Those 3 chords there are in the key of G. Okay, but let's have a look anyway at what the key of G actually is. Okay, a G major key, or any major key, is derived from a major scale, and we're going to look now at what a major scale is, in case you don't know. Forgive me if this is familiar already, but we'll go through it anyway. Let's start on a G note, like the open G string, and then to generate a major scale from that we go up to the 2nd fret. So we start off with a root note, then we go up 2 frets, then we get our next note by going up another 2 frets from that, then 1 fret from that, then 2 again, then 2 again, then another 2, then 1 again, and that gives us a major scale, which isn't immediately recognisable. It's the sort of do, re, mi scale that we're all familiar with. There it is there. Now each one of those notes, which are incidentally G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp and G, can be turned into a chord. You combine them with other notes from the scale and you get a bunch of chords. How that is done is, it's not particularly complicated, but it's going to make for a rather long and involved video if we get too bogged down in that particular process. So we're going to skip over that for now, and just trust me if I say that if you take those notes, the G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp and G, and harmonise that scale into chords, you'll get a G major chord, an A minor chord, a B minor chord, a C major chord, an D major chord, an E minor chord, and this weird kind of minor 7 flat 5 chord. This is an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then back to G again. Okay, so here's those chords. We've got G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, sometimes called a half diminished chord, that one, and then back to G again. Don't be intimidated by chords that have long sounding names like minor 7 flat 5. It's not, there's no correlation between the number of syllables in the name of a chord and how difficult it is to play. I'm sure we all remember when we first started playing the guitar, the dreaded F chord. You don't get much shorter name than F, but it was still a nightmare to play when we first started playing it. So don't be put off by long sounding names. And if you look at that F sharp minor 7 flat 5, there it is there. If I take my thumb away, which is providing the F sharp bass note there, you can see it's just an A minor chord, but with a F sharp bass note underneath it. You will often find that quite complex chords like that can be broken down into simple chords with a bass note other than the root. And that's a pretty good metaphor for what we're going to look at now, because we're going to be doing some chord substitutions. And I would advise you actually to just write those chords down. I'll say them once again, just write the names in a row. So you've got G, A minor, B minor, C, D, B minor, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, back to the G again. Okay? So if you just write those down, that's going to become useful in a second, because what you can do to make a slightly more exotic or posher version of any chord, all you have to do is go to its next door but one neighbour in that sequence. So if we want to do something that's a little bit like a posh version of G, then the next chord up from that is A minor, so we'll skip over that one, but the one up from that is B minor. So if you want to sound like you're playing a posh, jazzy version of G, let the bass player worry about the G bass note going on underneath it all, and all you have to do is play B minor. And I can actually demonstrate that here. There's a B minor chord. If I take just the core of that chord, those 3 notes there, and put a G bass note underneath it there, we now have, how smooth and jazzy is that? That's just a B minor chord, but with a G bass note underneath it. So what I'm going to do in the next little clip is play over the top of that bass line that we heard there, which, as we sort of saw, was outlining a G chord, a C chord, back to a G chord, into a D chord. I think the bass line was that. That is suggesting the chord sequence of G, C, G, D. And what I'm going to do is, wherever the bass line is suggesting the G chord, I'm going to play just this little snippet of the B minor. There's a full B minor chord. I'm just going to play this little section of it here. The C, if we give the same treatment to the C chord, we go to the next but one up, remember? So the next one up is D, and the next but one up is E minor. So I'm going to play this little snippet of E minor, just that. There's a E minor as a bar chord. I'll turn this way so you can see. There's E minor like that. I'm just going to play this little middle part of it here. So for the G chords I'm playing a B minor. For the C chords I'm playing this E minor. I can also use the B minor up here. There's a little snippet of B minor I can use there. And for the D chords, well, the next but one up from D, let's have a look. There's a D, The next one up is the E minor, and the next but one up from the D is the F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which, if you remember, is basically just an A minor chord. So when it comes to playing the D, I'm just going to play A minor like that. Simple as that. Okay, let's just run through that again. In order to get a more exotic sounding version of the chord that you're on, you play the next but one chord up from it in the key. So in the key of G major, the next chord up from D is E minor, and the next but one up from it is the F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which we know is just A minor. So when it comes to playing the D, I'm going to play the next but one up, which is effectively that A minor chord, but I'll play A minor there. Other little tricks you can do, there's a technique called sidestepping, which is, if I go back to the B minor that again I'm using for the G chord, there's that little core part of it there, and I can kind of play that sort of thing, but I can also add a little bit of colour by going that kind of thing, just stepping down a semitone. Okay, and as long as you come back up again, it resolves it. That creates a little bit of tension, which is then resolved. Okay, that's the way it works. It's all about not staying on wrong notes for too long. That's essentially what makes jazz sound jazzy, playing wrong notes but making them kind of work, and that just injects a little bit of that feel into the chord sequence. I'll do the same thing up here on the E minor that I'm using in lieu of the C chord, and the same thing on the A minor that I'm using in lieu of the D chord. That also gives me a nice cool little trick that I can do where if you think after the G we go to the C, then back to the G, and to the D again, and then it goes back to the G. I'm using a B minor, remember, to substitute for the G chord, so there's B minor. Immediately before it I've got the A minor, so I can just do a little run like that, which sounds really cool. Anyway, here's the demonstration of me putting those kind of chord ideas over the top of the bass line that you heard earlier. Okay, and finally we come to playing some lead guitar over the top of the backing track that we've created there. Remember how the G chord is essentially the focus of the whole thing, and in place of that G chord we're playing a B minor over the G root. What that enables you to do is a really cool little trick where instead of playing your lead guitar, which would be focused on the G major chord, so you might use lead ideas like that, or wherever they occur around the neck. What you can do is, because there's essentially a secret, a hidden little B minor thing lurking inside that G major idea, you can play as though you're focusing on the B minor part of it. So I'm just going to use the B minor pentatonic up here, probably extend it up a little bit, into this area here, and that alone will give quite a nice mellow, cool, smooth, jazzy sound. But I'm going to take it a stage further as well and use things that I mentioned in a previous video called neighbour tones. Now, neighbour tones are, if we take essentially any of the notes in that scale, let's just take a snippet of it here. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes there. There are 5 notes in a pentatonic scale. That's why it's called a pentatonic scale. Penta meaning 5. What you can do to use neighbour tones is look at each one of those notes, play it with your second finger, and go to the note 1 semitone or 1 fret below it, and the note 2 frets above it, and use both of those notes. This is the main note, this is the one that we're treating as home, okay, and you can use this note or this note or both as ways of getting into that note. So you can have then here's the next note in the scale, here's the next note in the scale, next note in the scale, next note in the scale, next note in the scale. So you get all kinds of cool little jazzy runs that go maybe something like this. That kind of thing. And it looks and sounds like you're using some ridiculously complex scale, but all it is the blues pentatonic scale that we all spend a great deal of our time in, with a couple of approach notes, neighbour tones they are called, surrounding each of the notes that we're familiar with. And as long as you keep that familiar pattern in your mind and just target those notes with that second finger, then your other fingers will just automatically, your first and fourth fingers will automatically fall on the correct notes either side of it. Right, here's a solo using those ideas. Hope you enjoy it.